He weighed my grandson on a scale and told me the boy cost too much to feed. My son-in-law thought he was just cutting costs, treating my family like a failing business asset. He thought I was just a lonely, grieving widower he could bully into silence. He forgot that before I was a grandfather, I was a superior court judge, and I've sent better men than him to rot in a cell for less. He was about to find out that the gavel doesn't always need a courtroom to strike. If you're listening to this, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're watching from. It helps to know I'm not just shouting into the void. It all began with the weather. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash the world clean. It's a myth they sell to tourists and people looking for a fresh start. In reality, the rain just makes the grime slicker. It turns the city into a watercolor painting left out in a storm. Everything bleeding into everything else. Boundaries dissolving until you can't tell where the sky ends and the pavement begins. I stood by the bay window of my study, the glass radiating a damp chill against my fingertips. A mug of coffee, black and lukewarm, sat on a slate coaster behind me. I hadn't touched it in an hour. Outside, the gray water streaked against the glass in vertical rivets, like the bars of a holding cell, distorting the world into a blur of charcoal and slate. My name is Thomas Vance. For 40 years, I sat on the bench of the Superior Court. I wore the black robe. I held the gavel. I decided the fates of thieves who stole to eat, murderers who killed for pleasure, and liars who had convinced themselves of their own truths. You don't do that job for 4 decades without it rewiring your brain. I learned to read a man not by his words, but by the biology of his guilt. The involuntary twitch of a jaw muscle, the sheen of sweat on a brow in a climate-controlled room, the specific frequency of a voice when the truth gets too close to the throat. I was a structural engineer of lies. I knew exactly where to tap to make the whole thing collapse. I thought I had left that world behind when I retired to this quiet cedar-shingled house on the edge of the city. I wanted peace. I wanted the silence of the rain to just be rain, not a metaphor for a cleansing that never comes. I was wrong. The courtroom doesn't leave you. It just changes venue. It was 7:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, a time for stillness when the silence was shattered. A black Range Rover tore into my driveway, moving with an aggression that felt personal. The tires crunched violently over the gravel, spraying wet stones onto the manicured lawn I had spent yesterday afternoon raking. The vehicle didn't just arrive. My stomach tightened, a reflex honed by years of watching dangerous men enter my courtroom. I knew that car, I knew the vanity plate, and I knew the driver. It was my son-in-law, Mark. Mark was a man who wore his ambition like a second skin, tailored and he was all expensive Italian wool, chemically whitened teeth, and a handshake that was always a fraction too firm, as if he were trying to crush something in your hand to prove he could. He was a man who viewed conversations as transactions, and people as leverage. He didn't park the vehicle. He abandoned it at a crooked angle, the engine ticking loudly in the wet morning air. He's running, I thought. The observation was instant, cold, and judicial. He is running from something, and he has brought it to my doorstep. I walked to the front door, the floorboards creaking beneath my slippers, the only sound in a house that had been too quiet since my wife passed. I pulled my wool cardigan tighter against the permeating dampness. When I opened the heavy oak door, the wind assaulted me, blowing rain into the hallway and soaking the welcome mat that hadn't welcomed anyone in weeks. Mark was already halfway up the stone steps. He was holding a massive, canopy-sized black umbrella over himself, shielding his suit from a single drop of water. He was dry. He was pristine. Trailing 6 feet behind him, head down, soaking wet, was my grandson, Leo. There was no umbrella for the boy. Mark marched up the stairs like a general retreating from a lost battle, leaving his wounded soldier to drown in the mud. "Thomas," Mark shouted over the wind. The voice was projected, practiced, the fake joviality of a salesman closing a bad deal. "You're a lifesaver. Seriously, I owe you one." He stepped onto the porch, encroaching on my space, and collapsed the umbrella with a sharp, violent snap. He looked frantic, but in a polished, curated way. His hair was gelled into a helmet of success, immovable against the gale. His cologne hit me instantly, a wave of sandalwood musk and old money. It masked the smell of the rain. "Mark?" I said. I didn't move aside. I stood in the doorway, blocking the warmth of the house. I wasn't ready to let this energy inside yet. I looked past his shoulder to the small figure shivering at the bottom of the steps. "Leo," I called out, my voice softening instinctively. "Get in here. You're soaking wet." Leo stepped onto the porch. He was small for 10 years old, too small. He was wearing a backpack that dragged his shoulders down, looking far too heavy for his frame. His hood was pulled up tight, casting a shadow over his face, hiding his eyes. He didn't look at me. He looked at his shoes, expensive, limited edition sneakers that were scuffed, muddy, and ruined. He looks like a defendant, I thought, a chill running up my spine that had nothing to do with the wind. He looks like he's waiting to be sentenced. "What's the emergency?" I asked, finally stepping back to usher them into the foyer. "The Tokyo deal," Mark said, checking his gold Rolex. He didn't look at me. He looked at the time as if the watch held the secrets of the universe. "The investors are getting cold feet. I have to fly out within the hour to salvage it. Total nightmare. If I'm not there to hold their hands, the whole portfolio collapses." He was already typing furiously on his phone, thumbs flying, eyes glued to the screen. "Emily is still at the wellness retreat in Oji," he continued, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. "No phones allowed. Total digital detox. You know how she gets? She needed to unplug, so I couldn't call her. You were the only option." "It's no trouble," I said slowly, my eyes fixed on Leo. The boy was standing on the hardwood floor, dripping water. A puddle was forming around his sneakers, but he didn't move to wipe it up. He just stood there, paralyzed. I haven't seen the boy in a month. It's been too long. Mark didn't seem to hear me. He was in his own orbit. "Great. Okay, here's the bag." He dropped a heavy leather duffel bag onto the floor. It landed with a dull, heavy thud that vibrated through the wood. "Clothes, toothbrush, his homework," Mark listed, still typing. "He has a math test on Friday. Make sure he studies. He's been slacking." Mark stopped typing. He shoved the phone into his breast pocket and pointed a manicured finger at me. The gesture was aggressive, parental in the wrong way. "No video games, no TV, until he finishes his chapters." He finally looked down at Leo. He didn't crouch to eye level. He didn't offer a hug. He didn't brush the wet hair from the boy's forehead. He just placed a heavy hand on Leo's shoulder, squeezing the trapezius muscle. I saw Leo flinch. It was subtle, a tiny, involuntary contraction, a microscopic recoil, but I saw it. I'd spent 40 years watching men try to hide their fear, and I knew that flinch. It was the same reaction I used to see in defendants when the bailiff moved too quickly toward them with cuffs. It was the body betraying the mind's terror. "Be good, Leo," Mark said. His voice dropped an octave, losing its public warmth, becoming something cold and flat. "Don't be a burden to your grandfather. Remember the rules." "Yes, sir," Leo whispered. The words hung in the hallway. "Sir," my mind seized on the word. Since when does a 10-year-old call his father sir in a private home? That isn't respect. That is compliance. Mark looked back at me, flashing a bright, empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks, Thomas. I'll be back Thursday night. I'll text you." And then he was gone. He swept out the door, the umbrella snapping open like a shield. The heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing out the wind, but trapping a different kind of cold inside my house. The silence he left behind was heavy, pressurized, like the air in a room moments before a thunderstorm breaks. I turned to my grandson. He hadn't moved. "Well," I said, trying to shake off the unease, "let's get that wet coat off before you catch pneumonia." Leo moved robotically. He unzipped his jacket, his small fingers fumbling slightly with the cold metal. He hung it on the coat rack, but he didn't just hang it. He aligned it. He adjusted the shoulders so it hung perfectly symmetrical. He smoothed the fabric down. Then he took off his shoes. He placed them side by side, parallel to the wall, heels touching the baseboard, laces tucked in. Not an inch out of place. It was precise. It was military. It was terrifyingly disciplined, for a child who should have been kicking them off and running for the cookie jar. "Come on," I said, forcing warmth into my voice, though my heart was starting to ache. "Let's go to the kitchen. It's warm there." My kitchen was the heart of the house. It still smelled faintly of old wood, coffee, and the sweet ghost of cinnamon, a remnant of my late wife Sarah. She had believed that food was the only language that truly mattered, that a hot meal could solve half the world's problems. I had designed this room for her, but now it mostly echoed, "Sit, etter you like," I said, gesturing to the breakfast bar and the small round table by the window. Leo didn't hop onto a stool. He didn't run to the window to look at the rain. He stood by the entrance of the kitchen, hesitating on the threshold, looking at the floor tiles as if checking for tripwires. "Leo?" I asked, pausing with the refrigerator door half open. He looked up, his eyes darting to me and then away. Is it okay if I sit?" he asked softly. I frowned, a deep furrow appearing between my brows. "Of course, it's a chair. Leo, that's what it's for. You don't need a permit to sit down in this house." Why is he asking for permission to exist? Leo walked to the small round table. He didn't relax into the seat. He sat on the very edge of the chair, his back as straight as a steel rod, his hands folded tightly in his lap, knuckles white. He didn't slump. He didn't look around. He stared at the empty placemat as if it were a test he was failing. "I bet you're hungry," I said, pulling out a carton of eggs and a jug of milk. Mark was in a rush. "Did you eat this morning?" Leo shook his head slightly, a micro-movement. "No, perfect," I said, grabbing a mixing bowl, "because I happen to make the best blueberry pancakes in the state of Washington. It's a judicial fact. I ruled on it myself in the case of Vance versus the International House of Pancakes. I tried to keep the mood light, to joke, but the air in the room felt thick, oppressive. My jokes landed on the floor like lead weights. I got to work. I whisked the batter, focusing on the rhythm scrape, fold, mix. I threw thick-cut bacon onto the cast-iron skillet, letting the aggressive sizzle and the smoky, salty scent fill the room. I wanted to overwhelm his senses with comfort. I wanted to break through that strange, hard shell he had built around himself. "How is school?" I asked over my shoulder, keeping my tone casual. "Fine," Leo said. One word, flat, monotone. "And your mom?" I asked, watching the batter bubble on the griddle. "Is she enjoying the retreat? Ojai is beautiful, this time of year." "I guess so. You haven't talked to her?" "No," he said, his voice barely audible over the sizzling bacon. "Dad says she needs peace." I frowned as I flipped the pancakes. Peace. Emily had always been communicative. She was vibrant, loud, full of life. Even when she was stressed, she would call just to vent. But Mark had said she was fragile lately. He said she needed space. I had respected it, perhaps too much. I felt a sharp twinge of guilt in my chest. Had I been respecting her privacy, or had I been avoiding the noise of their marriage? Had I been ignoring the silence because it was easier for me? The pancakes were done. Golden brown, fluffy, steaming, bursting with dark purple berries. I plated 3 of them, added 2 strips of crisp bacon, and a generous, glistening pour of maple syrup. I walked over to the table and placed the plate in front of Lee with a flourish. "Order in the court," I joked, my voice a little too loud in the quiet kitchen. "The verdict is delicious. Dig in, kiddo." I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and leaned against the granite counter, crossing my arms, smiling. I waited for the moment every grandfather loves, where the kid dives in, gets syrup on his face, and finally acts like a child. I expected him to grab the fork. I expected him to make a mess. But he didn't move. Leo just sat there. He stared at the pancakes. His hands were gripping his knees, so hard that his knuckles were stark white, like bone pushing through skin. His chest was heaving, short, shallow, panicked breaths. His eyes were wide, fixed on the food, dilating with something that looked disturbingly like horror. But he made no move to pick up the fork. The silence stretched. It became heavy, uncomfortable. The clock on the wall ticked, tick, tick. Each second felt like a hammer striking an anvil. "Leo?" I asked softly, the smile fading from my face. "What's wrong? Do you not like blueberries anymore?" He didn't answer. He didn't blink. Then a single tear leaked out of his left eye. It tracked through the dirt on his cheek and dripped off his chin. Then another. I put my mug down on the counter. The playful grandfather vanished. The judge stepped forward, alert, observant, and deeply, profoundly worried. I walked over to the table, my movements deliberate and slow. In the courtroom, I had learned that sudden movements triggered fight-or-flight responses in the guilty. But Leo wasn't guilty. He was the victim, yet he sat there vibrating with the frequency of a cornered animal waiting for the trap to snap shut. I knelt down beside his chair. My knees cracked, a sound of age, of old bones carrying too much weight. But I ignored it. I needed to be on his level. I needed to dismantle the hierarchy of height that adults use to loom over children. "Leo," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, shedding the booming baritone of the bench. I channeled the softness I used to use when reading him bedtime stories, years ago before the silence set in. "Why aren't you eating?" He turned his head slowly to look at me. The terror in his eyes was absolute. It wasn't the worry of a child who thinks he might get a timeout. It was a primal, dilated fear. It was the look I had seen on the faces of witnesses who knew that testifying meant signing their own death warrants. It was a look that didn't belong in a kitchen smelling of maple syrup and bacon. His lower lip quivered. He took a shaky, hitching breath, his small chest struggling against the fabric of his oversized hoodie. "Can I—" He started, then choked on a sob. He swallowed hard, his throat clicking. "Can I eat today?" The question hung in the air like a gunshot echo. I froze. My heart skipped a beat, then hammered against my ribs with a violence that made me lightheaded. The world tilted on its axis. The rain against the window seemed to stop. The refrigerator's hum ceased. All of reality narrowed down to that one horrific question. "What?" I whispered back, my voice barely audible. I needed to hear it again, even though I prayed I had misheard. Leo didn't look at me. He looked at his hands, twisting them together until the skin turned red. "Can I eat today? I didn't finish the dishes yesterday. The water was too hot, and I dropped a spoon." He looked up at me, tears spilling over, hot and fast. Dad said I lost my points. He said I had negative points. He said I had to wait until tomorrow. Points. The word landed in my mind like a jagged stone. A point system. A transactional economy for basic survival. He said, if I asked for food, I'd lose more points. Leo whispered, the confession rushing out of him now. A dam breaking, and then I'd have to sleep in the garage again. A cold rage spread through my vein. It wasn't the fiery anger of a younger man. This was something else. This was liquid nitrogen. It was the icy, absolute clarity of a judge who has just realized the defendant isn't just a criminal, but a monster. "Sleep in the garage." I reached out and pulled him into a hug. He went rigid against me, his muscles locking up in anticipation of a blow. It broke my heart. "Leo," I murmured, holding him tighter as he slowly, incrementally relaxed. I could feel his ribs through the thick fabric of the hoodie. He was bird-thin, fragile. I ran my hand down his back and felt the knobs of his spine, sharp and protruding. He was wasting away right under my hands. "Yes," I said, my voice thick with emotion, but steady as steel. "Yes, Leo. You can eat. You can eat today. You can eat tomorrow. You can eat whenever you want." I pulled back and gripped his shoulders, forcing him to look me in the eye. I needed him to see the truth in my face. Nobody is ever going to stop you again. Do you hear me? The points are gone. I am canceling them. Overruled. He nodded against my shoulder, a guttural sob escaping his throat. The sound of a child who has been holding his breath for months, finally exhaling. "Eat," I said, pushing the plate closer until the steam hit his face. "Eat it all." He picked up the fork with a shaking hand. What followed wasn't a breakfast. It was a scene of desperation. Leo didn't eat like a boy enjoying a treat. He ate with the frantic, terrified urgency of a famine survivor. He shoveled the pancakes into his mouth, barely chewing, swallowing huge, painful gulps. He grabbed the bacon with his fingers, grease-coating his chin, his eyes darting around the room between bites, as if he expected Mark to burst through the door and snatch the plate away. He licked the syrup off the fork. I watched him from the counter, my coffee forgotten, turning cold. I felt a profound, sickly shame. I had been sitting in this house, mourning my own loneliness, staring at the rain while 5 miles away my grandson was being starved. I had prided myself on my ability to spot a lie, to read the hidden truths of men. Yet the greatest crime of my life had been happening to my own blood, and I had missed it. I didn't miss it, a dark voice whispered in my head. I avoided it. I didn't like Mark, so I stayed away. I let my dislike for the father cost me the son. When Leo was full, the crash came instantly. The sugar spike and the emotional release exhausted him. His eyes grew heavy, his posture slumped. The adrenaline that had been keeping him upright evaporated. I guided him to the living room. I set him up on the large leather sofa, wrapping him in a thick wool blanket, the one Sarah used to knit under. I put on an old cartoon, something colorful and loud, a distraction from the gray reality outside. You rest, I said, smoothing the hair back from his forehead. His skin was cool, clammy. I have some work to do in the office. I'll be right down the hall. I waited until his eyes drooped shut, until his breathing deepened into the rhythmic rasp of sleep. Then the judge went to work. I walked to the hallway where Leo's backpack hung on the rack. I lifted it. It was heavy, too heavy for a fourth grader. It felt dense, like it was filled with stones. I took the bag into my study and closed the heavy mahogany door. I locked it. My study was my sanctuary. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the smell of leather and old paper, the dim light of the green banker's lamp. It was a place of order, of logic. I placed the backpack on the desk, under the circle of yellow light. I unzipped it and dumped the contents onto the polished wood surface. Textbooks tumbled out. A pencil case. A pair of gym shorts, neatly folded. A crumpled permission slip. And a black, leather-bound notebook. It was expensive. Moleskine, the kind Mark used for his business meetings. I opened it. The handwriting was unmistakable. Mark's obsessive architectural print, small, precise, devoid of flourish. The title page read Behavioral Correction Log. Leo. My breath hitched. I flipped the page. October 3rd. Infraction failed to make bed to standard. Corners not tucked. Penalty, 10 points. Correction. No breakfast. 20 push-ups. October 5th. Infraction. Emotional outburst. Cried over math homework. Penalty, blank 20 points. Correction, no dinner. Isolation in garage, 2 hours. October 10th. Infraction, I'm hungry. Complaint. Penalty, blank 50 points. Correction, 24-hour fast. Water only. I read on. My hands began to shake, the paper rattling softly in the quiet room. It went back months. This wasn't parenting. This wasn't even strict discipline. This was a detailed, sadistic record of torture. I flipped further. The penalties escalated. November 12th. Infraction. Attempted to contact mother. Penalty, 100 points. Reset to 0. Correction, 48-hour liquid diet. Phone confiscated. Mark was starving his own son. Not because they were poor. Mark wore a Rolex that cost more than my first car.
He was starving him because he enjoyed the control.
He was breaking the boy down, piece by piece, stripping away his will, his strength, his voice. Why? The question swirled in my mind. Mark was obsessed with status. Appearance was his god. Why risk having a malnourished child? People talk, teachers notice, neighbors see. Unless he made sure no one noticed. Unless he had woven a web of lies, so thick that no one could see the spider at the center. I looked closer at the dates. The severity had ramped up drastically 3 months ago. The fast became longer. The isolation periods stretched from hours to nights. Right around the time Emily went to the retreat. Just then, my phone buzzed against the mahogany desk. The sound made me jump. Unknown number. I stared at it. The vibration rattled the table, shaking the open notebook. I picked it up. Vance? I answered, my voice rough. Judge Vance? A woman's voice. Young, hesitant, trembling slightly. Yes? My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm Leo's teacher. My grip on the phone tightened until the plastic creaked. I looked at the notebook, at the entry for October 10th. Miss Jenkins, I said, sitting down heavily in my leather chair. I was just about to call the school. Is Leo okay? She asked quickly. There was panic in her voice. Mark called this morning. He said Leo was sick. violent stomach flu. But I was worried. Why were you worried, Sarah? I asked. Stomach flu. Happened because Leo doesn't get sick like other kids, she whispered. Judge Vance, Leo steals food. The confirmation hit me harder than the suspicion. Tell me, I commanded. It started a few months ago, she said, her voice gaining strength, fueled by pent-up concern. He hoards crackers from snack time. I caught him digging through the trash bin in the cafeteria for half-eaten apples. I tried to call his mother weeks ago, but the number was disconnected. When I called Mark, she paused. I could hear her breathing unevenly. What did Mark do? He came to the school, she said. He didn't yell. He was quiet. He told the principal that I was harassing his family. He said he'd sue the district if I didn't stop. He said Leo has a compulsion, Prader-Willi syndrome. He said Leo eats until he's sick, so they have to restrict him. Lies, I said, looking at the notebook. Layers and layers of lies. He withdrew Leo from the lunch program, she continued. He said Leo had severe allergies to everything. He sends him with a bento box. Judge, it usually has 3 grapes and a slice of turkey. That's it, for a whole day. You did the right thing calling me, I said. You were right to be afraid, but Leo is safe now, he's with me, and he just ate 3 pancakes. Oh, thank God, she breathed. Thank God. There's something else, she added. Mark? He asked for Leo's records yesterday. He wanted everything transferred. Transferred where? He didn't say. He just said they wouldn't be needing the school anymore. Mark wasn't going to Tokyo. He was liquidating. He was erasing his footprint. Thank you, Sarah, I said. I'll handle it. Be careful, Judge, she warned. There's something wrong with that man. His eyes, they're empty. I know, I said. I've seen them. I hung up. The silence of the study rushed back in, but now it felt charged, dangerous. I looked at the notebook again. I ran my hand inside the back cover, feeling for anything else. My fingers brushed against paper. I pulled out a folded slip. It was a pharmacy receipt, prescription Fenterman. Adult dosage. Patient Leo Davis. Prescribing doctor, Dr. Aris Thorne. My blood ran cold. Fenterman. An appetite suppressant. A powerful stimulant. Mark wasn't just starving him. He was chemically forcing the boy's body to reject hunger. He was poisoning him. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I walked to the window. The rain was hammering harder now, drowning the world. I needed to find Emily. If Mark was doing this to Leo, his own flesh and blood, what had he done to the woman who stood between him and total control? I dialed the number for the wellness center in Ojai. Serenity Springs, the name Mark had dropped so casually. Serenity Springs, how can I help you? A soft, pre-recorded sounding voice answered. Hello, my name is Thomas Vance. I'm calling to check on a guest. Emily Davis. There was a pause. The sound of typing. 1 moment, sir. I watched the rain streak the glass. Please be there, I prayed. Please let her be doing yoga and drinking kale smoothies. Please let me be a paranoid old man. I'm sorry, sir. The receptionist came back. We don't have a guest by that name. We haven't had an Emily Davis in our system for, well, ever. I checked the archives going back 2 years. My stomach dropped, a physical sensation of falling. Are you sure? My son-in-law said she was there for a detox. Maybe under her maiden name, Vance? I've checked both, sir. No Emily Vance, no Emily Davis. Thank you. I hung up. The phone felt like a brick in my hand. Mark had lied about the trip. He had lied about the food. He had lied about the school. I sat back in my leather chair, staring at the gray light filtering through the window. Mark wasn't in Tokyo. Emily wasn't in Aoji. And Leo was sleeping in the next room, his body pumped full of stimulants and fear. I wasn't just a grandfather anymore, and I wasn't just a retired judge. I was the prosecution, and the investigation had just begun. I stood at the window of my study, the phone still warm in my hand. The rain had intensified, turning the world outside into a blurred impressionist painting, breaks and greens through the downpour, and the line of Douglas firs that separated our properties. I could just barely make out the roofline of Mark and Emily's house. It was a modern glass and steel structure that Mark had insisted on building. He called it open concept. I called it a fishbowl. From here it looked dark, abandoned. I needed local eyes. I couldn't go over there myself, not yet. If Mark had cameras, if he was watching remotely, my presence would trigger an alarm. I needed a witness who belonged in the scenery. I thought of Martha Higgins. Martha lived on the other side of Mark, a retired librarian who treated the neighborhood like her personal Dewey Decimal System. She cataloged everything: new cars, late nights, arguments, trash day violations. We used to joke that the NSA should outsource to her. I found her number in my old leather-bound address book. I never trusted the cloud with the people I actually knew. I dialed, "Hello?" Her voice was sharp, alert. "Martha, it's Thomas Vance." "Thomas." The sharpness softened instantly into surprise. "Goodness, I haven't seen you in ages. I saw that black beast of a car speeding away from your place this morning. Nearly clipped my hydrangeas. Is everything all right?" "That's what I wanted to ask you, Martha," I said, leaning my forehead against the cold glass. "Have you seen Emily lately? Or the boy?" There was a hesitation on the line. A silence that wasn't empty. It was heavy with things unsaid. "Martha?" I prompted. "Thomas," she began, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I shouldn't say. Mark came over about 2 weeks ago. He was very intense. He told me Emily was ill. Contagious. Contagious." I repeated. The word tasted metallic. Did he say what it was? He hinted at something mental that had turned physical. Said she was dangerous to herself and others. He said if I saw her wandering, I wasn't to approach her, just to call him immediately. "And Leo? I haven't seen the boy play in the yard in months," she said sadly. "The blinds are always drawn, Thomas. Even on sunny days. It's like a tomb over there." "Martha," I said, pressing harder, "think back, before the blinds were drawn. Did you see anything? Hear anything?" "I heard shouting," she admitted. "Late at night, screaming, really. It wasn't just arguments, Thomas. It sounded like pleading about money. Emily was screaming about a trust and Leo's future. I closed my eyes. The money. It always begins and ends with the money. And there was the smoke," she added. "Smoke? Bonfires," she said. "In the backyard, in that fancy fire pit of his. Mark was out there 3 nights in a row last week. Burning papers. Stacks of them. He looked manic. He was pacing around the fire, poking at the ashes, making sure every scrap was gone. "Thank you, Martha," I said, my grip on the phone tightening until my knuckles ached. "You've been very helpful. Please keep your doors locked. Today." "Thomas, what's going on?" "Just a family matter," I lied. "But if you see Mark come back, call the police." I hung up. Mark was destroying evidence. He was erasing the paper trail. He was isolating the witnesses. He is cleaning the crime scene. My mind whispered, I needed to follow the money. And I needed someone who could dig where a retired judge couldn't. I needed a bloodhound. I called Frank. Frank Miller was the former chief of detectives. We had worked together for 30 years. I signed the warrants. He kicked down the doors. He was retired now, running a high-end private security firm that catered to Microsoft executives and nervous tech billionaires. But he still had the badge in his blood. Judge Frank's voice answered on the second ring. It was gravelly warm and sounded like tobacco and whiskey. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Finally ready to lose that $100 on the golf course. "No, Frank," I said. "No golf today." The tone of my voice killed his humor instantly. I heard a chair squeak as he sat up straighter. "What do you need?" "I need a trace, and I need a background check. Deep dive. Financials, medicals, travel logs. Everything that doesn't show up on a credit report." "On who?" "My son-in-law, Mark Davis." Frank went silent. "Family. You sure, Thomas? Once you pull that thread, you can't put it back." "He's abusing the boy, Frank," I said, my voice cracking slightly before I clamped it down with iron will. "I have physical evidence. Starvation. Abuse. Drugs. And Emily is missing. He says she's at a retreat in Ojai, but the facility has never heard of her. I think he might have done something to her. Jesus, Thomas. He was burning documents in the backyard last week, I added. I'm on it, Frank said. The warmth was gone, replaced by the cold, metallic professionalism that had made him the best detective in the precinct. Give me 2 hours. I'll get Sully on the financials. If there's a penny out of place, we'll find it. 2 hours. I agree. I spent the next 120 minutes in a state of suspended animation. I paced the hallway. The floorboards creaked in a rhythm. Step, creak, turn, step. I checked on Leo every 20 minutes. He was sleeping fitfully, clutching a throw pillow to his chest, his face pale against the dark leather. Every time he moaned in his sleep, my heart stopped. I went to the kitchen. I cleaned the batter bowl. I wiped the counter. I washed the same spoon 3 times. I was trying to scrub away the feeling of helplessness. At 11:30 a.m., my computer pinged. A single sharp note in the quiet house. Subject Davis report. Confidential from F. Miller. I sat down. I put my reading glasses on. My hands were steady now. The waiting was over. The trial was beginning. I opened the attachment. It wasn't just a report. It was an autopsy of a life built on sand. Mark Davis employment status. Terminated 6 months ago. Reason: internal investigation regarding embezzlement of client funds. Outcome: settled out of court to avoid scandal. Mark agreed to pay back $1.2 million. He wasn't a high-flying partner. He was unemployed. He had been pretending to go to work for half a year. I scrolled down. The numbers bled red. Current debt $4.2 million. Sources: online gambling, high-stake poker, high-risk futures trading, personal loans from unregulated lenders. He was drowning. He was gambling to try and pay back the embezzlement and losing more in the process. And then the piece that stopped my heart. Spouse: Emily Davis. Status: involuntary civil commitment. Petitioner: Mark Davis. Power of attorney. Facility: St. Jude's Psychiatric Facility. Downtown Ward, Indigent Wing. I gasped, the air rushing out of my lungs. St. Jude's. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. A place for people with no names and no money. I read the legal notes attached to the file. Mark had triggered a dormant clause in the trust fund I had set up for Emily. The incapacitation clause: if Emily was declared mentally unfit by a physician, Mark, as the primary trustee, gained full control of the assets to manage her care. If Leo was a minor, Mark controlled his portion too. He hadn't killed her. He had done something crueler. He had locked his sane wife in a psych ward, stripping her of her voice and her freedom just to rob her blind. My phone rang. It was Frank. You read it? Frank asked. No. Hello? I read it, I whispered. He put her in the indigent wing, Frank. She has $3 million in that trust, and he put her in the state-funded ward, because he's siphoning the trust. Frank said, we tracked the transfers. He's moving $50,000 a week into offshore accounts in the Caymans. He's cashing out. He's a monster. It gets worse, Thomas. I ran a location trace on Mark's phone. He's not in Tokyo. He's not even at the airport. Where is he? He's at the Tula Lip Casino. He's been there since he dropped Leo off at your place. He's at the high-limit slots. He's burning through what's left of the money. He's desperate, I said. He's dangerous, Frank corrected sharply. And Thomas? I looked up this Dr. Aries Thorne, the one who signed Emily's commitment papers. The one prescribing the speed, your grandson. Who is he? He's a concierge doctor for the desperate. Lost his license in Nevada for overprescribing opioids. He operates out of a strip mall now. He sells diagnoses. Thomas. You pay him $5,000, he'll say you have cancer for the insurance, or he'll say your wife is crazy, so you can take the house. Mark paid him to commit Emily. I realized. And the drugs for Leo. If Leo gets sick. Frank trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. The life insurance, I finished for him. My voice was devoid of emotion now. I was pure logic. If Leo dies of natural causes related to his condition, Mark gets the payout. He wipes the debt. Thomas, Frank said, his voice urgent. Call the police. Call 911 right now. Send them to the casino. Not yet, I said. What? Why? You have the smoking gun. I have pieces of paper, I snapped. And he has power of attorney. If I call the police, Mark will show them the court order committing Emily. He'll show them the medical records from Dr. Thorne saying Leo is a compulsive liar with a rare eating disorder. He's a manipulator, Frank. He speaks the language of authority. He'll talk his way out of it, claim I'm a senile old man, interfering with his sick family, and he'll take Leo back. I can't let him take that boy, I said, my voice breaking. If Mark takes him, Leo won't survive the night. There will be an accident. So what are you going to do? Frank asked. I looked at the empty gun safe in the corner of my office. I looked at the rain slashing against the window. I'm going to give him a trial, I said darkly. A very short one. Thomas, don't do anything stupid. I need you to go to St. Jude's, Frank. Right now. To do what? Take your badge. Even if it's retired, it still opens doors. Take Elena Russo with you. Your banker? She manages the trust, I explained. If she walks into the hospital administrator's office and freezes the payments to St. Jude's, or threatens a federal audit, they will release Emily faster than you can blink. Hospitals hate liability. Get her out, bring her here. And you? Frank asked. What are you going to do while I'm playing hero? I looked at the phone. I looked at the black notebook on my desk. I'm going to invite Mark to dinner. I walked out of the study, the heavy door clicking shut behind me. The hallway felt different now. Before, it was just a corridor in a lonely house. Now, it was a tactical position. Every shadow looked deeper. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a warning. I went into the living room. Leo was awake. He was sitting up on the sofa, the wool blanket pulled up to his chin. His eyes were red-rimmed and glassy, tracking me as I entered. He looked small, impossibly small, against the dark leather cushions. Grandpa? His voice was a rusty hinge. I sat on the coffee table in front of him, ignoring the stiffness in my knees. I needed to be close. I needed to be the anchor in the storm I was about to summon. Leo, I said, keeping my voice low and steady, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I need you to be brave. Can you do that? I think so, he whispered, pulling the blanket tighter. I'm going to call your dad, I said. The reaction was instantaneous. Leo recoiled as if I had slapped him. His eyes widened into saucers of pure panic. No, he gasped, scrambling backward against the cushions. No, please, don't call him. He'll be so mad. He'll reset the points. He said, if I caused trouble, he'd take away the bed. He started to shake, a violent tremor that rattled the blanket. He won't hurt you, I promised, reaching out to grip his hand. His fingers were ice cold. Leo, look at me. Look at me. He locked eyes with me, his breath hitching in short, terrified gasps. I am not calling him to tell on you, I said, enunciating every word. I am calling him to bring him here so we can stop him forever. You can't stop him, Leo whispered, tears spilling over again. He's the boss. He says I'm expensive. He says I cost too much money. The cruelty of it punched the air out of my lungs. Expensive. Telling a child he is a debit in a balance sheet. You lied, I said, my voice hard. You are not expensive. You are priceless. And he is a thief. I took out my phone. My thumb hovered over Mark's contact name. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a second to center myself. I had to shed the skin of the vengeful judge and put on the mask of the confused, failing old man. I had to become the liability Mark thought I was. I dialed. He answered on the first ring. I could hear the background noise immediately, the manic, electronic chime of slot machines, the murmur of a crowd. Thomas. Mark's voice was breathless, high-pitched. Everything okay? I'm just boarding. It's loud here. Liar. Mark, I said. I let my voice tremble. I injected a tremor of senility and panic into the syllables. Mark, I have a problem. A terrible problem. The background noise seemed to dim as Mark pressed the phone closer. What is it? Is it Leo? Did he wet the bed? It's the boy, I stammered. He... Oh, God, Mark, he found my gun.
What? Mark's voice spiked. It wasn't fear. It was interest. I was in the garage, I lied, weaving the narrative rapidly. I was looking for some old files. I left the safe open. I stepped out to get coffee. I didn't think he'd I didn't know he was there.
I took a jagged breath, simulating a panic attack. There was an accident, Mark. A loud bang, and then blood. An accident? Mark asked. The silence on the line was deafening. He didn't ask, "Is he alive?" He didn't ask, "Where is he hurt?" He didn't scream. He sounded eager. He sounded like a man who had just been dealt a royal flush. "Is he—" Mark started, then stopped himself. "Thomas, is he breathing?" "He's hurt," I cried, my voice rising. "Badly. He's not moving. There's so much blood on the rug I haven't called 911 yet. I'm panicking, Mark. I don't know what to do. My hands are shaking. If the police come, they'll see the gun. They'll charge me with negligence. They'll take my pension. They'll take the house. You have to help me." I played to his greed. I played to his perception of me, as a weak, selfish old man concerned about his assets. "Don't call 911, Mark shouted. The command was sharp, immediate. "Do not call them, Thomas. Do you hear me? But he's bleeding. Put pressure on it with a towel. Do not call the police," Mark instructed, his voice taking on the smooth, authoritative tone of a fixer. I'm not in the air yet. The plane had mechanical issues. We're still at the gate." Another lie. "I'm getting off the plane. I'm driving back now. I'll be there in 45 minutes. I'll handle it. I'll handle the police. Just wait. Don't let anyone in. Do you understand? Don't open the door for anyone." "Okay," I sobbed into the phone. "Okay, Mark. Please hurry. I think he's dying." "Just wait," Mark said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm coming." The line went dead. I lowered the phone. The trembling in my hand vanished instantly. My face settled back into a mask of cold resolve. Mark wasn't coming to save his son. He was coming to ensure the job was finished. An accident with a gun at the grandfather's house. It was the perfect alibi. It was better than a disease. It was a tragedy that absolved him of everything. He would sue me for wrongful death. He would claim I was senile, negligent. He would get the life insurance payout, and then he would come after my estate for damages. He would walk away a rich man, free of his wife and child. I looked at Leo. He was staring at me, confused by the performance. "Go upstairs, Leo," I said gently. "Right now." "But you said—" I lied to him, I said. "You are safe, but I need you to hide. Go to the guest room, lock the door, put your noise-canceling headphones on, play your game on my iPad. Do not come out until I come get you. Even if you hear yelling, even if you hear a bang. Do you understand?" Leo nodded, his eyes wide. He slid off the couch. "Run," I whispered. He ran. I listened to his small footsteps fade up the stairs, followed by the soft click of the lock. Now the stage was mine. I went to the kitchen. I set the dining table. 2 plates, 2 glasses. I placed the black notebook in the exact center of the table. It sat there like an accusation, a black hole on the white tablecloth. Then I walked to my study. I knelt before the gun safe. I spun the combination. Left, right, left. The heavy steel door swung open with a hiss of air. I took out my .38 special revolver. It was a cold, heavy weight in my hand. I hadn't fired it in years, but I kept it clean, oiled. I pressed the latch and swung the cylinder open. 6 copper-jacketed bullets sat in the chambers. I turned the gun over and emptied the bullets into my palm. Clink, clink. They felt heavy and cool. I dropped them into the pocket of my cardigan. I snapped the empty cylinder back into place. Click. I walked back to the dining room. I placed the empty gun on the sideboard next to a vase of dried flowers. It was in plain sight. It looked lethal. It looked like the weapon of a careless old man. I sat at the head of the table. I folded my hands on the tablecloth, and I waited. The house settled into a terrifying silence. The rain drummed against the roof, a steady, rhythmic beating. The refrigerator hummed. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Time distorted. 10 minutes felt like an hour. My mind raced through the scenarios. Mark would come in hot. He would be adrenalized. He would expect a dying child and a distraught old man. He would see the opportunity to let Leo bleed out, or perhaps help him along. I had to be ready. I had to be the rock he broke himself against. 45 minutes later, exactly as promised. I heard the engine. The Range Rover roared up the driveway, tires skidding on the wet gravel. He was driving fast. Ruthless. A car door slammed. Heavy footsteps pounded up the porch stairs. He didn't knock. He didn't ring the bell. The front door burst open, slamming against the wall, with a violence that shook the frame. Mark rushed in. He was soaking wet, but he didn't care. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. His dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, clinging to his sweaty skin. His eyes were wild, darting around the hallway. "Thomas," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Where is he?" I didn't stand up. I didn't turn around. "In the dining room," I called out calmly. My voice was steady, resonant, the voice of the court. Mark ran down the hall. He skid around the corner into the dining room. He stopped dead. He looked at the rug. There was no blood. He looked at the corner. There was no body. He looked at the table. I was sitting there, calm, composed, hands folded. The black notebook was in front of me. The gun was on the sideboard behind me. Mark's chest was heaving. He looked confused, his brain trying to reconcile the scene with the narrative he had built in his head on the drive over. "Where is he?" Mark hissed, saliva flying from his mouth. "Where is Leo?" "He's upstairs," I said. "Safe." Locking the door. Mark froze. He looked at the gun on the sideboard. Then he looked back at me. His face twisted, morphing from fake concern into a snarl of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You lied to me," he whispered. "Sit down, Mark," I said. "I don't have time for your games, old man," he spat, stepping forward aggressively. "I'm taking my son. You're clearly incompetent. Calling me with a story like that. Sit down." I slammed my hand on the table. It wasn't a request. It was an order. The authority in my voice, the accumulated weight of 4,000 sentences handed down from the bench, hit him like a physical blow. He flinched. He stopped. He pulled out a chair and sat, his eyes never leaving mine. "I know," I said. "Know what?" he sneered. "That you're losing your mind." "I know you're broke," I said, reciting the facts. "I know you were fired 6 months ago. I know you're embezzling. I know you're $4.2 million in debt to people who break legs for a living." Mark's face went pale, the blood draining away to leave him looking like wax. "And I know Emily is in St. Jude's," I continued, relentless. He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off with a sharp gesture. "And I know about this," I said. I tapped the black notebook, the starvation, the points, the torture. "The Fentermine, from Dr. Thorne." Mark stared at the book. His eyes narrowed. He recognized it. Then slowly a smile spread across his face. "It was a brittle, ugly thing." He laughed, a short bark of a laugh. "So," he said, leaning back in the chair, crossing his arms. "It's a parenting log. The kid has issues. You can't prove abuse from a diary." "I have the receipts, Mark. I have the teacher's testimony. I have the school records." "He's a skinny kid," Mark shrugged, regaining his composure. "And the money? That's marital assets. I have power of attorney. She's sick, Thomas. She's mentally unstable. The court gave me the power." He pointed a shaking finger at me. "You can't touch me. I am the legal guardian. Even if you call the cops right now, I'll be out on bail in an hour. It's my word against a senile old man and a mentally ill wife. I'll win, then I'll take Leo so far away you'll never find him." "You are a monster," I said quietly. "I'm a survivor," Mark shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I did what I had to do. The market crashed. I needed liquidity. It was just a bridge loan until I got back on top." He stood up, the chair screeching backward. He glanced at the gun on the sideboard. "I'm leaving," he announced. "And I'm taking Leo. Get out of my way." "I'm giving you one chance, Mark," I said, remaining seated. "One chance to be a human being." Mark paused, his hand on the back of the chair. "What?" "Pick up that phone. Call the police yourself. Confess to the fraud. Sign custody of Leo over to me. Admit to the abuse." I looked him in the eye, offering him a lifeline he didn't deserve. "If you do that, I will pay for your defense lawyer. I will ensure you get help for the gambling addiction. I will ask the judge for leniency. You will go to prison, but you will come out a man." It was the hardest offer I had ever made, every fiber of my being. wanted to destroy him. But I was a man of the law. I had to offer the path of redemption, even to a devil. Mark looked at me. He looked at the notebook. He looked at the gun. He weighed his options: prison and poverty, or the gun, the money and freedom. You really are senile, he spat. Why would I go to jail when I can just take what's mine? He lunged. He didn't go for the door. He went for the sideboard. He grabbed the gun. Mark moved with the jerky, uncoordinated speed of a man running on pure adrenaline and panic. He snatched the revolver from the sideboard, his movements knocking over the vase of dried flowers. The glass shattered against the hardwood floor, a sharp, violent sound that seemed to signal the end of civilized conversation. He spun around, leveling the barrel at my chest. The weapon looked absurdly large in his manicured hand. He didn't hold it like a soldier or a cop. He held it like a movie villain, sideways, loose, his finger already dangerously tight inside the trigger guard. His other hand was shaking violently, tremors running up his arm to his shoulder. You should have died in your sleep, Thomas, he whispered, his voice trembling with a terrifying mix of fear and exhilaration. You should have just stayed out of it. Why couldn't you just be a normal, oblivious old man? I sat perfectly still. My hands remained folded on the white tablecloth. I felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. In the courtroom, the moment before the verdict is read is always the quietest. This was that moment. Put it down, Mark, I said, my voice low and even. You're not a killer. You're a thief. There is a distinction. Don't cross that line. I am already across it, he screamed, the gun wavering in the air, the black eye of the barrel tracing a chaotic figure eight over my heart. You think I can go back to what? Bankruptcy? Prison? Being the guy who lost everything? He took a step closer, his shoes crunching on the broken glass. No, he breathed, his eyes wide and glassy. I have to finish it. It's the only way out. The narrative works, Thomas. Don't you see? It's perfect. He was rewriting reality in real time, convincing himself of the lie before he even committed the act. Grief-stricken grandfather shoots son-in-law in a fit of dementia, then turns the gun on himself. He smiled, a grotesque twisting of his lips. The police will buy it. Everyone knows you're old. Everyone knows you've been lonely since Sarah died. It solves all my problems. The investigation stops. The trust fund unlocks. I get Leo back. You'd kill your own son? I asked, looking past the gun, straight into his eyes. Because that's what you're doing. If you kill me, you kill him. He has no one else. He has me. Mark shouted, I'm his father. You're his tormentor. Shut up. Mark roared. He steadied the gun with his other hand, locking his elbows. Oprick roared. He steadied the gun with his other hand, locking his elbows. Ample warning, Judge. Court is adjourned. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the muscles in his forearm tighten. I saw the tendons in his neck strain. I saw his knuckle turn white as he squeezed the trigger. I didn't close my eyes. I watched him. The hammer pulled back. The cylinder rotated. The firing pin struck. Click. The sound was small, metallic and pathetic against the silence of the room. Mark blinked. The bang hadn't happened. The recoil hadn't come. For a second, he didn't understand. He looked at the gun as if it had betrayed him, as if the machine itself was part of the conspiracy. He pulled the trigger again. Click. Panic flared in his eyes, hot and sudden. He pulled it again, and again, frantically, mashing the trigger. Click, click, click. The sound of his failure echoed off the walls. I stood up slowly. My knees didn't hurt anymore. I felt 10 feet tall. I never keep a loaded weapon in the house, Mark, I said, my voice filling the room, drowning out the frantic clicking of the empty gun. Rule number 1 of gun safety. Treat every weapon as if it is loaded, but rely on none. Mark looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. You baited me. I gave you a choice, I corrected him. I offered you redemption. You chose murder. You chose to pull that trigger. The intent was there. The malice was there. It's a trick, he screamed, throwing the gun at me. It clattered harmlessly onto the table, sliding across the surface and hitting the notebook. You tricked me. I did keep something else in the house, though, I said softly. I looked past Mark, toward the swinging door that led to the kitchen. Frank? The door swung open. Frank Miller stepped out. He wasn't wearing his Gulf attire. He was wearing his old tactical vest, the word security emblazoned on the chest. He held a sleek, modern pistol at the low ready, his posture perfect, his face a mask of stone. Behind him, 2 uniformed police officers filed in, their hands on their holsters, filling the small dining room with the imposing weight of the law. Mark spun around, backing away until he hit the hideboard. No, wait, this is a misunderstanding. He invited me here. He threatened me. We heard everything, Mark, Frank said, his voice gravel and iron. He tapped his chest pocket, where the small lens of a body camera peered out like a judgmental eye. Attempted murder. Assault with a deadly weapon. We got the audio of you planning the crime scene. We got the visual of you pulling the trigger 5 times. It's entrapment, Mark shrieked, looking for an exit, but the room was sealed. And we have one more witness, I said. The police officers parted. From the hallway behind them, a figure emerged. She looked like a ghost. Her skin was translucent, pale as milk. Her blonde hair, usually perfectly styled, was limp and tied back in a messy knot. She was wearing ill-fitting sweatpants and a sweatshirt that belonged to Frank. She was leaning heavily on Frank's arm, her legs trembling, but her eyes were burning with a blue fire that could scorch the earth. Emily, Mark whispered. The color drained from his face completely, leaving him looking like a corpse. He slumps the sideboard. Baby, don't, Emily said. Her voice was raspy, damaged from weeks of sedation and screaming, but it cut through the room like a knife. Don't you dare call me that. You're sick, Mark stammered, holding his hands up in a defensive posture. I was trying to help you. I put you there to get better. I did it for us. Emily stepped away from Frank. She stood on her own, swaying slightly, but refusing to fall. You told me my father didn't want me, she said, each word a stone she was throwing at him. You told me he blamed me for asking for money. You told me Leo was happy.
You told me I was the problem.
I was trying to fix our finances. Mark pleaded, tears streaming down his face now, tears of self-pity, not remorse. The market turned on me. I needed the trust to float us. I was going to pay it back. I swear. You starved our son, she said. She took a step forward. Mark flinched, expecting a blow. You weighed him, she spat. You made him earn his food. You drugged him with diet pills. He has a condition, Mark lied, clinging to the fiction even as the walls collapsed. She slapped him. It wasn't a cinematic slap. It was a messy, weak, desperate strike that connected with his ear and his jaw. But it carried the weight of 1,000 betrayed moments. It was the sound of a marriage ending. You starved him, she repeated, her voice breaking into a sob. Arrest him, I said to the officers. The command broke the spell. The officers moved in with practiced efficiency. They grabbed Mark's arms, twisting them behind his back. Ow! You're hurting me, Mark whined, struggling uselessly. Do you know who I am? I know the district attorney. I'll have your badges. You have the right to remain silent. One of the officers droned, snapping the cuffs on. Click, click. A sound far more satisfying than the gun. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Thomas, Mark screamed as they dragged him toward the door. He looked back at me, his face contorted with fear. Thomas, please. Don't let them take me. I can't go to jail. I'm not like them. Thomas. I didn't answer. I didn't look at him. I looked at the notebook on the table. Frank stepped forward and picked up the gun in an evidence bag. He looked at me and nodded. It's over, Judge. They dragged Mark out into the rain. I heard him screaming my name until the heavy cruiser doors slammed shut, cutting off his voice. The house fell quiet. But it wasn't the empty, lonely silence of this morning. It was a clean silence. The pressure was gone. I looked at Emily. She was staring at the spot where Mark had stood, her chest heaving. Dad, she whispered. I opened my arms. She collapsed into me. I held her, feeling her fragile frame shake with sobs. I held her like I hadn't been allowed to in years. I smelled the antiseptic soap of the hospital on her skin, But beneath it, I smelled my daughter. "I've got you," I whispered into her ear. "I've got you." "He's gone." "Where is he?" she asked, pulling back, her eyes searching the room. "Where is Leo?" "Upstairs," I said, hiding. Like I told him. She didn't wait. She turned and ran for the stairs, stumbling, catching herself on the banister, dragging her exhausted body up toward her son. I stayed in the dining room for a moment. I sat back down in my chair. My adrenaline was fading, leaving me feeling every single one of my 70 years. My hands started to shake, the reaction finally setting in. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor. I looked at the rain, which was finally slowly beginning to stop. The storm had broken. The grime was washing away. I took a deep breath, stood up, and followed my family upstairs. The blue lights of the police cruisers finally stopped flashing against my living room walls. The sirens faded into the distance, carrying the chaos away with them. Frank stayed behind for a moment. He stood in the foyer, clicking a pen, signing off on the evidence bag that held the notebook. He looked tired. We both looked tired, two old men who had just played a young man's game. "You okay, Thomas?" he asked, capping the pen. "I will be," I said, leaning against the doorframe. My adrenaline was crashing hard now, leaving a hollow, trembling sensation in my legs. "Thank you, Frank, for everything." "Don't thank me," he grunted, putting on his coat. "Just take care of them." "That boy looks like he's been through a war." "He has," I said. "We all have." Frank nodded, squeezed my shoulder. A brief, rough gesture of solidarity, and walked out into the drizzle. I locked the door. I threw the deadbolt. Click. The sound was final. The fortress was sealed. But this time, the danger was on the outside. I walked into the living room and sank onto the sofa. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of the morning. It was the exhaust of a storm that had blown itself out. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the blank television screen. Listening upstairs, I could hear them. I heard the murmur of Emily's voice, low, soothing, a continuous stream of comfort. I heard Leo crying. It wasn't the terrified, stifled weeping of the morning. It was loud, jagged, messy crying. The kind that shakes your whole body, the kind that washes the poison out. I closed my eyes and listened to the sound of my family healing. Memories drifted in, unbidden. I thought of Emily when she was Leo's size, running through this very room with a scraped knee, convinced the world was ending. I remembered how I used to fix it with a bandage and a story. I had forgotten how to do that. Somewhere between the gavel and the empty house, I had forgotten that justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration. "Dad?" The voice startled me. I opened my eyes. Emily was standing at the top of the stairs. She was holding Leo's hand. They looked like refugees. Emily's eyes were swollen, her face blotchy. Leo was still clutching the throw pillow I had given him, dragging it like a shield. But they were standing. They were together. "He's hungry," Emily said. Her voice cracked on the word, a mix of heartbreak and hope. A small, watery smile touched her lips. I stood up. My joints popped, but I ignored the pain. "Well," I said, clearing the thickness from my throat, "we can't have that. Not in this house. In this house, hunger is illegal." I walked to the foot of the stairs and held out my hand. Leo hesitated for a fraction of a second, a ghost of the old fear, before he released his mother's hand and took mine. His grip was small, but it was there. We walked into the kitchen. It was 2:00 p.m. The morning's dishes were still in the sink, the remnants of the first failed breakfast. "What do you want?" I asked, opening the refrigerator wide, letting the light spill out. "We have everything. Burgers? I can defrost a steak. We can order the biggest pepperoni pizza in Seattle." Leo looked at me. Then he looked at his mom, seeking confirmation that this wasn't a trap. Emily nodded, tears streaming down her face again, silent and happy. He looked at the fridge, seeing the food not as contraband, but as fuel. "Pancakes?" he asked softly. I froze. I looked at the batter bowl in the sink. "Pancakes?" I laughed, and the sound felt good in my chest. "Again? For lunch?" "Yes, please," he said. "All right," I said, rolling up my sleeves. "But the court has new rules. This time I need a sous chef." I can't do it alone. I pulled the heavy wooden stool up to the granite counter. Leo climbed up. He looked so small against the vastness of the kitchen, but he was higher up now. He was off the floor. I handed him the whisk. It was oversized in his hand. You mix, I flip, I commanded gently. That's the statute. I started cracking eggs. Leo started whisking. He was clumsy at first, his movement stiff, waiting for a reprimand that never came. But as the yellow yolks swirled into the milk, he found a rhythm. Clink, clink, swoosh. He watched the batter swirl, hypnotized by the simple chemistry of cooking. Grandpa? Yeah, kiddo. He stopped whisking. He looked at the pantry door. He bit his lip. He glanced at Emily, then back to me. Can I have chocolate chips this time? The room went still. I knew what that question meant. Chocolate was sugar. Sugar was poison in Mark's regime. Asking for chocolate was an act of rebellion. It was a declaration of independence. I looked at Emily. She covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a sob, nodding vigorously. Leo, I said, walking to the pantry. I grabbed the bag of semi-sweet chocolate chips. The big bag, the family size. I walked back to the counter. I didn't measure them out. I didn't use a cup. I ripped the bag open and poured. A cascade of dark chocolate rained down into the bowl. It was too much. It was an obscene amount of chocolate. It was perfect. You can have the whole damn bag, I whispered. Leo's eyes went wide, for the first time all day, for the first time in years. I saw it. A smile. It was tentative, showing teeth that were too big for his mouth, but it was real. Mix, I said. We cooked. The smell of vanilla and melting chocolate replaced the smell of rain and fear. The griddle hissed. The smoke alarm didn't go off, but we wouldn't have cared if it did. We sat at the round table, the same table where he had cried hours ago. I placed a stack of 3 pancakes in front of him. They were ugly, lumpy, and oozing with chocolate. They were the most beautiful things I had ever created. Eat, I said. Leo didn't wait. He didn't look for points. He didn't check the clock. He picked up his fork and he ate. He got chocolate on his chin. He got syrup on the table. He ate with joy. I watched him, and I watched Emily watching him. She was eating too, slowly, gaining strength with every bite. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The clouds were breaking apart, violent gray giving way to a soft bruised purple. A few shafts of weak golden sunlight hit the wet pavement of the driveway, making the gravel shine like diamonds. I knew this wasn't a fairy tale ending. Tomorrow the lawyers would call. There would be depositions. There would be a custody battle, though Mark would lose it from his cell. There would be therapy for Leo, years of it to undo the wiring in his head. There would be nightmares where he woke up screaming about points. Emily would have to rebuild her life from zero. I would have to be a father again when I should have been resting. But as I watched my grandson take a bite of a chocolate chip pancake, closing his eyes in pure sensory bliss, I knew the truth. I had spent 40 years in a courtroom searching for justice. I thought justice was a gavel banging on wood. I thought it was a sentence read aloud. I was wrong. Justice was this. It was a boy eating when he was hungry. It was a mother holding her son's hand. It was the absence of fear in a quiet room. We had won. The verdict was in, and it was